What do you think differentiated you when it came to building the business, building a personal brand, marketing yourself? Because all this, and then, I mean, you're on TV too. You've done some very strategic things that anybody else coming out of the agency, anybody else coming out of the military, FBI, even police force, they have a story to tell. So, yeah, you know, it's a little bit sexy, but I mean, FBI is sexy. You're up high enough in the military, you do some cool shit. That's sexy too. You can build a brand around that. What
Sure,
made you
yeah.
different?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and some people have, and they've done it very well.
Yeah.
You know what? I kind of blundered into, if we just look at the media appearances, if you just talk about doing talking head appearances for the news on national security issues or counterterrorism or whatever the topic may be, I kind of blundered into it. It was I had moved from London to the East Coast to set up an office. We had just taken our first investors. And they, BGR, which is a fantastic lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. And so part of the agreement for the investment was open an office there with them, co-locate. And at the time, we were starting to build up a presence in Iraq. And this was early 2003, so very beginning of our first incursion there. But we had been dealing with some of the infrastructure companies. And so the point of this story is, one day, Ed Rogers, great guy, terrific individual, part of BGR and the original founding partners. He came walking to my office, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, Fox News needs somebody to talk about Iraq. Head over there. It'll be fun." You gotta be kidding me. So I made a couple calls. They said, "Sure, don't talk about anything stupid, but you can do it." And the agency's always been good with me that way.
Yeah.
But so I went over, did the appearance, and found out after the first couple that, honestly, as long as you don't say anything stupid and you don't fall off your chair, right? The news networks need to fill up a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I just happened to have a lot of, experience and background in certain areas and was willing to go on and talk about that. And so some of the outlets, including Fox, they were very good. They were very good to me, and then I discovered that I wasn't getting paid for any of it, but what they would do is they would put the company name on the bottom, with the company. And once I realized that, then we were off to the races. Because like I said earlier, there was no way we could have, as a startup, afforded that sort of marketing. It just wasn't going to happen. And so, I realized that, that was an edge, right? We had an opportunity there. And then everything else just sort of kind of fell into place, I suppose. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say it's amazing how to have a good story, you just have to have a cool career, do something incredible, and then speak about it. But you'd be surprised at how many people just don't feel comfortable leaning into that, and then you did. Now it's working out.
I mean, I think the agency, again, because of what I was doing in operations, and you do have sometimes an overblown sense of confidence. And so I think that part of it never, and I genuinely like talking about issues of the day. I spend a great deal of time focused on that. I have a lot of friends in a lot of different places, and we end up banging on about the current crises.
There's never a shortage of them, so
there's never a shortage, and so it helps if you find it all interesting, right? You can't fake that part of it. It's like, but I again, I think luck kind of fell into it again, and then once I realized that it was certainly beneficial, it wasn't like I was going to turn down opportunities.
Yeah, no, obviously. Another one of the rules that you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, just in terms of velocity and getting shit done, it's number 4. It's get off the X.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly? Where does that come from in an agency context? And then how does that translate into business, startup, entrepreneurship?
Well, in an operational sense, not just the agency, but the military and other organizations, the X means is essentially an ambush site. So, you don't want to be on the ambush site to begin with.
Yeah, fair.
So the idea is you spend a lot of time training to recognize indicators of a potential ambush. Okay? And, but if you do get on the X, if you're unfortunate and for whatever reason you land on that spot, then you have to be able to get off the X. You have to get out of there, right? And in operational terms, that's a tough thing because everything starts locking up, right? And you start getting blinders, and your hearing goes, and in any difficult situation, right? You have to start relying on big muscle memory, and so that's again why training is so important. Why it's not enough just to do some training. You have to constantly review it. But anyway, the point is, in business, what it means is, I think anyway, in my opinion, this is what, again, there's no hard and fast, I suppose, to any of this, but from my perspective, it simply means knowing how to make decisions quickly with imperfect information, right? Because once you land in the shit from an operational perspective, right, you gotta take action, right? You don't have time to sit around and hope that you get all the data, where are all the hostile elements? What the hell is happening? You have to start making decisions, right? And it's the same in business, right? If you wait for all the data sets to come in, if you wait for all the analysis to be done on whatever it may be, something bad's gonna happen, right? Or the competition's gonna have your lunch, or you're gonna lose the opportunity, or your reputation's gonna be damaged, whatever it might be. So it really comes down to how do you learn to, and also a lot of this is about how do you impart that ability to your personnel, to all the folks that are working with you, to make these decisions, again, with imperfect information.
And so when you're making these decisions with imperfect information, as a CEO, is that just being a leader for a period of time, or is there actual practice that you can do to make sure that when shit hits the fan, you don't screw it up?
Yeah, there's a lot to this. It's a fairly, part of it is not that complicated. Part of it is knowing your risk appetite, which is another element of.
I was actually curious about that one too, only because I thought that business inherently comes with risk. So how do you not have a risk appetite if you're building something?
Well, you'd be surprised. And even, going back to, the Intel community, local Intel organizations, which, by definition are risk-taking operations, they go through periods of time where they become risk averse, right? It's because, they've had blowback from, some operation, or they've gotten their ass kicked up on Capitol Hill too many times.
Yeah.
And so, suddenly you've got a cycle where management is avoiding risks, and I've seen a couple of those cycles sweep through the agency over the years, and it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And you have to understand what, and when you're understanding what your risk appetite is, it also means you have to understand what your shareholders or your investors or your board of advisors risk appetite is. You have to understand what the client's risk appetite is, for sure, when you're talking about working for them and providing strategic intelligence or guidance or due diligence or whatever it may be. And that's a key part of it, and that informs a lot of other decisions that you make, including how do you again make decisions with imperfect information.